Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you today. Eric DeGotti is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his recent appearance on episode 286 of Boundless Body Radio. Eric DeGotti has spent the last 20 years in the fitness industry as a coach, trainer, and instructor, pioneering his unique approach to client assessment, performance enhancement, and injury prevention. Every year, Eric travels around the world teaching and speaking to trainers, coaches, and therapists as a lead instructor for functional movement systems and guest speaker for such prestigious organizations as Mount Sinai Hospital, New York University Medical, the Navy SEALs, U.S. Army, Nike and SPARQ Camps, Glazier Clinics, the Mayo Clinic, and multiple major universities. Eric has also appeared in the New York Times bestseller, The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. His list of training clients includes individuals who have been Olympic Gold Medalists, Gatorade Players of the Year, All-Americans, National Champions, World Series Champions, and Pro Bowl athletes. He also works with many high-level county, state, national, and world champion sports teams in leagues such as the NFL and Major League Baseball. Eric DeGotti, what an honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Awesome being back.
It's such an honor to have
Thanks
you
for
back.
having me.
We had such a fun conversation last time, especially around functional movement screens and things like that. So I'm really curious to deep dive into so many other topics that we can discuss with you. Basically had about half of my questions answered last time, so it was really easy just to invite you back and convert those questions over to my script for this time. I do want to start out with something a little bit more serious. A lot of our former guests have had different ways of dealing with this. How have you dealt with the popularity, the fame, the fortune after appearing on Boundless Body the first time?
The paparazzi hiding in the bushes of the house has been probably the biggest issue, because then when I go to trim the hedges, I got to look for them first. That's probably been the biggest thing.
Tough.
It's screwing up my landscaping a little bit.
Yeah, that's tough. We've heard beefed up security. Some people are turning to drugs and alcohol, which is, it's tough, but that comes along. It's like the Macaulay Culkin thing, you finally make it big and, life goes off the rails.
This is what we signed up for.
That's right.
This is what we signed up for.
It is what it is. Well, that's awesome. Like I said, such an honor to have you back. Can you remind our audience who you are and where your background in fitness came from and how you became interested in that?
So started off as a fitness professional, just in a big box gym, and kind of grew from there. Really was interested in the performance side of things, and spent as much time as I could learning everything I could. If you were selling certifications or workshops or courses, which there wasn't nearly as much of in the late 90s, early 2000s, all you had to do was send me a brochure to my house and I was there. So I had the good fortune early on to catch on learning from some people like Charles Poliquin, like, Paul Chek, like, some of the greats that started our industry, including Gray Cook and Lee Burton at FMS. And that's how I got the connection there, became friends and coworkers with them for the last, what's going on 16 years now. And so that's kind of evolved, where I had my own facility for about 12 years, which is a multidisciplinary center where we had, personal trainers and group fitness coaches and performance training, as well as physical therapy, chiropractic care, nutritional counseling, all kind of under one roof. And then as my teaching and consulting business grew, I kind of had to make a decision. So I had done everything I wanted to do with the facility. So it was time to move on and just do that. And that's pretty much the bulk of my time, is working as a consultant, as well as doing education for trainers and coaches and clinicians.
Yeah, there's such a theme in your career, which I absolutely love. And I definitely gravitate towards people like you. You didn't skip any steps. You didn't jump to be who you are today without doing the learning, without putting in the time and the effort and all the certifications. I'm wondering how that experience for you of putting in the time and work influences your coaching today, when you're coaching maybe young athletes that maybe feel a little bit entitled.
So, the joke I say, Casey, is when I'm teaching, is that I have my doctorate from SSU, and that is the University of Screwing Shit Up. Everything I've done is basically a mistake, and everything I do now in the education is to try to pay it forward, to say, look, you don't need to make all these mistakes. You can get there a lot faster if you don't make them. But, those mistakes were on the business side. Those mistakes were on the training side. And so being able to learn from those processes have been a powerful thing that steered me in the right direction. And probably the other thing that I learned out of it is as much as you need to plan and forecast. And that's what great training programming is. There's also, it taught me the element of not the element of surprise, but the element of you don't know where this is going to take you. Like if you told me when I went and took, out of all those classes I was taking, that sitting in the front row of an FMS class with these two guys I never heard of, Gray Cook and Lee Burton, that I'd be a lead instructor for them teaching around the world for the next 16 years. If you told me, I'd go and work with the New York Giants, the team I grew up rooting for 9 years and seeing them win 2 Super Bowls, I didn't think that wasn't part of the plan, like the 5-year plan that I laid out. It was, let's go be a trainer, and I want to be the best trainer at the gym. And okay, now I've kind of checked that box somewhat. Now what can I do next? I want to own my own facility. Okay, own my own facility. Okay, well, that's kind of, how do I make this better? How do I do something unique? And, back in 2002, when we opened, to do a multidisciplinary center with physical therapy and chiropractic care and all that stuff, that was unheard of. We didn't get along and playing nice in the sandbox together, all of us as a business model or as kind of just professional entities. So it was kind of like, how do I create this model that we can kind of reach? And now it's almost like you see one on every corner, and it's a little bit different. But in the beginning, it was convincing a lot of people that, hey, this is a vision that could work. And so that was not easy. And that was some mistakes of assuming everybody saw the same vision I had. Everybody is just as enthusiastic about this concept as I am. And so learning to as much as you can plan, and this even is a big part of the programming course that he teaches, as much as you can plan. I could put together the perfect program for you, Casey. And then you show up on Monday morning and you're a different organism than I evaluated last week. And so now I have to learn how to adjust and modulate based on the dynamic and mosaic bunch of cells that's in front of me now, because since the last time I assessed you, things may have changed. You may have had 2 cross-country flights. You may have had a crappy night's sleep, or you went to a function, had too much wine and sugar, or you might have had a stressful, week at work. All those things are going to change your ability to adapt to the program that I wrote. And so I then have to be able to adjust that and be able to adjust that so it hits the right mark. So I get you right at the edge of your ability where I can train you and break it down, but not so much that it's going to affect our ability to come back and do it again the next day.
Yeah, that's right. That's so well explained. I think that makes you such a great coach. And I just think some people might listen to your introduction and hear this guy that's worked with all these elite athletes, Super Bowl teams, Major League Baseball, Pro Bowl, and think, wow, this guy's like so lucky he was able to do that. And it's like, screw luck. Like you have to be on the grind and make mistakes a lot of times to get to that kind of level. And I think I just think it's really inspiring that you're willing to go through those mistakes and that learning process to get to where you are today. I think that just is where all the value is. And I think that's where a lot of the younger generation might not appreciate as much. So really cool.
I wish there was a bot like you could get and get 10,000 Instagram followers. You know what I'm saying? Like it would work that way. Like I could purchase something where it just fast forwards me past everything. Yep. But that's not how it works.
Skipping the process.
It was, you got to eat dirt a bunch of days, and so what you're reading back is the highlights of 24 years with a lot of getting kicked in the ass in between those.
Yeah.
Right. There's as an entrepreneur, there's way more no's than there are yeses. Yep. You're just hearing the yeses. I don't give you the resume of all the no's.
Well, I love that. I think that's very well explained. I've heard you recently on a podcast have a discussion that I thought was fantastic. And I want to start with the same question. What makes a great coach?
So the answer that I now use is my standard kind of thought. And every once in a while, the moon and stars and planets align, and I get this momentary flash of brilliance, at a small level. And it was on a phone call with a good friend of mine, John Tureen, who was a former strength coach of the Colts and the Buffalo Bills and very decorated NFL strength coach. And he was about to go on a podcast, and he said, "Hey, they're asking me what makes a good coach, and what would you say?" And it just kind of hit me at that point to say, well, a good coach, a great coach, is someone who is so good at the technical things that they eventually become obsolete. Meaning that I'm so good at teaching you the technical aspects of how to do an exercise, of how to go through the machinations of your program, that eventually I become obsolete. That it's the best thing I can see is when I'm doing a training session and I don't have to say anything to you. I just, sit there and watch, because if I don't say anything, you're correcting yourself. You're self-recognizing and auto-correcting. If you could then go walk into another gym, and one of the best compliments I ever got is one of my clients was in a gym and didn't know this guy, but a guy walked up to him and said, "How long have you been training with Eric?" He's like, "How do you know I know Eric? How do you know Eric?" He's like, "I watched you train." He's like, "There's only one way you train. There's only one way that you know how to train like that." And so that's the best walking advertisement. And so to be so good at the technical that I become obsolete is awesome. Right. On the flip side is you become so valuable in the tactical, in the planning of, why are we doing this today? Why 6 reps instead of 12 reps? Why pairing these things together? Why are we doing this for this many weeks? Why is this now and not later in the year? That's the tactical aspect of it. And that's what really makes the coach valuable. And and this could be a coach in anything, really, a sports specific coach, or it could be a skill coach, or it could be, a fitness coach. Is that, the great example I try to give is, as much as I'm we're talking about the jerseys in the back before that we got from beating the Patriots twice. Bill Belichick is still, possibly the greatest coach of all time. And I've worked with guys who played for him, and he's so meticulous and militant about the procedure and the technical, that if he didn't show up for practice one day, it would probably run just as smooth. But he's so unbelievable at the tactical that he changes his game plan from week to week, depending on who the opponent is. It's not like, hey, I'm this West Coast or run and shoot or, some type of specific style of offense. He caters his offense to what's going to beat that team that week. And if anybody plays fantasy football knows, don't pick one of his players because they could, run for 200 yards one week, and the next week they may not even play, because he's not dug in his heels to a single system. And so that's the dynamics of what makes a coach great, is that I'm not just a kettlebell guy. I'm not just an FMS guy. Is that there are situations where I may use a majority of that stuff with someone. I may use none of that stuff with someone, because it's really based on what the situation in front of me commands, as opposed to I'm going to do this thing with everybody. In whether it's, I don't care what shape that hole is, I have a square peg and I'm going to jam it in there no matter what.
That's right. And I love, we talked about this on our last conversation. I love that you make trainers identify what their shtick is, what their thing is, and then attack it as if, you're taking the other side, just to realize like, oh, this is great. This is a really great tool, but this isn't the only thing that you can use.
Yeah. The best way to really appreciate anything, a system, a method, any of those things, is to try to poke as many holes in it as possible. And so that's one of the things I've done with everything, is that the way I've gotten such a strong connection with, say, the FMS and functional movement systems is reading all of the haters on most social media about everything they bash about it. And sometimes they're right. And usually when they're right, it's because they're blaming it for stuff it was never intended to do. When they say the FMS is not sports specific, 1,000%, you're right. You know why? Because it was never meant to be. The FMS doesn't prevent injuries. Guess what? Nothing does. It doesn't. Never said it prevents injuries. So you look at things like that and say, well, that's just, you're taking it out of context, right? It's just as important that you hear what I'm not saying as much as you hear what I am saying. And so being able to have that ability to understand each thing has its time and place. And so that really gives that thing, whatever that thing is, that method, that much more elegance.
Yeah, I love that. When we're thinking about, workouts, there's a difference between a workout and there's a difference between training. And what you're describing with all these systems and planning things out and trying to accomplish something, that to me sounds a lot more like training. Can you explain the difference between a workout and training, and who needs each one? There's nothing wrong with either one, in my opinion, but there seems to be a crowd that would, want to be more to one side than the other.
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 layers to this. So the first thing I would always tell my staff when I did have the facility is I said, your job is not just to show exercises. And I said, because if that's all you do is show exercises, well, guess what? I have this phone right here. I can go on YouTube for free and get exercises. Instagram, there's all sorts of free extra. Why would I pay you anything to show me exercises? I can get them for free right here. So that's the lowest hanging fruit, is I just show exercises, right? Because there's thousands of exercises, and so that's the first thing. And the next thing is a workout, right? That's just, here's what you're going to do. Here's what's on the whiteboard for the day. There's not, and if I were to question you right now, if I walked into your training facility and you have a whiteboard up with a workout, and I walk over and say, okay, well, why are you doing that? Well, why is that there and not here? And why are you doing that many reps? And if you don't have a really good, salient answer for those things, then you're not really doing anything but now taking a bunch of exercises, just slapping it on a board, right? And that's not to say there aren't times where a workout is just fine, right? And in meaning that I have a great friend of mine who, as a more of a hobby than as a second career, became a spin instructor. And the guy's a super high energy guy. I love him to death. And so I've gone and taken his spin classes just because it's fun, right? And it's awesome. And yeah, I burn some calories, and yeah, I get some cardiovascular fitness. Does it fit into the steps or the program that suits my goals? Probably not, right? But that's okay, right? Now, if I were to say, I'm going to do nothing but go to Mike's spin class for the next 6 months, and that's all I'm going to do, I'm going to get really good at Mike's spin class, but I'm not going to get the goal that I may have of something else that doesn't provide. And so that's where a program comes in. And basically the easiest way to describe it when I have someone in front of me, as I said, there's where you are now, and then there's where you want to be. And there's a gap in between those two things. My job is to figure out what's creating that gap and eliminate those barriers. And those barriers could be everything from your mobility to not having enough strength, not having enough muscle, having too much body fat, not sleeping well enough, not eating correctly, not hydrated. All of those, there's a million factors that go into that. And I have a whole performance pyramid with athletes that has 59 factors that go into what actually shows up on the field or on the court. And it's basically systematically using that as a checklist to say, okay, well, what are the things that you're good with, right? And now it's a matter of competencies and capacities. Do you at least have the baseline competency? If I want to give you a loaded squat exercise, can you at least do it, a fundamental body weight squat? And if you can't do that, well, adding weight's probably not going to make it a whole lot better. It may make it worse. So that's a competency. And then there's capacities where you have some strength, but you just don't have enough strength for what you need. You have some speed, you just don't have enough speed for what you need. So it's a matter of measuring and going through that checklist to say, or what are the barriers that are holding you back from that thing, or that those abilities you want to have, what you want to be.
Yeah, and I think I've heard you explain this recently too, which I thought was hilarious. What most people think they want out of a workout is, I want to be a sweaty mess. I want to feel sore afterwards. You have a nice little system for when somebody wants to do that. You don't even charge for it, right?
Yes. No, I don't charge for it. It's free. Here, you want this service, and I'm offering this to any of your listeners as well. So this is one of the most fun parts of my initial interview with a new client is I say, okay, well, how do you know if you've gotten a good workout? And they kind of think about it, and 99.9% of the time, they say one of two things, if not both. They say, well, I sweat a lot. It was really hard. And then the second thing they say, well, I was kind of sore afterwards. I could really feel it afterwards. And I say, all right, perfect. I got just the thing for you. Here's what you're going to do. And I tell you what, I'm not going to even charge you for it. Just don't tell anybody. Here's what you need to do. You're going to come to my house this weekend. You're going to mow my lawn. You're going to mulch. You're going to clean out the shed. You're going to clean out the garage. You're going to do all the chores around the house. And you're going to sweat a lot. You're going to be really sore. It's going to be awesome. And they look at me like I'm insane. I said, well, I'm giving you what you asked for, right? And I said, even better is if you want to get, not only do you not have to pay for it, not only will I not charge you for it, you can actually get paid for it. Like, go stand in front of a Home Depot and wait for a pickup truck to roll up and ask for workers, and you just jump in the back. They'll actually pay you to do day labor and go dig a ditch somewhere. At least you'll have a hole at the end to show for your work, right? So it kind of gets the people to reframe, like, that's not what it is. It doesn't mean that you don't work hard and you don't sweat, it doesn't mean that you might not get sore sometimes. It means that if that's your only barrier, if that's your only criteria for a good workout, the barrier for entry is really low. And your expectations are way too low, right? You're here to look better, feel better, perform better, or some combination of all the above. And everything we do should be a step towards that. And if we're not, then we're just doing busy work.
Yeah, totally agree. Super funny example with a very serious message. I absolutely love it. We're definitely going to start offering that around here. So if regionally you're in the western part of the United States, you can come to Utah and do it here. If you're in the east, go see Eric. But either way, we'll put you to work and get some shit done around here, which is great. But that's a really serious point that you're making, is most people think that if I'm doing a bunch of work, I'm going to see this certain result. I think the spin class is a great example. How many people have I seen over the years taking those hard classes all the time and getting so frustrated that they're not getting to their goals? They're not reducing their body fat. Their body comp isn't really changing. It's like you're not following the right formula for the right result. You're just getting hot and sweaty and becoming a mess versus understanding what steps are going to take, like your checklist, to get to your actual goal. Those two things are completely different.
Yeah, and I could have 5 people come in all with the same goal and get 5 different programs.
That's right.
Right. Because there's different reasons why they're not at their goal. Right. So if you came in if you're an athlete and you want to get faster, my first question is, well, first of all, is faster for what? Right. There's a big difference between the speed that I may need for center fielder versus a offensive guard versus hockey goal. Like, all those things are very unique aspects of speed. So you can take those 59 blocks and we can boil them down even more. You boil strength down into what kind of strength. There's relative strength. There's maximal strength. There's these different subcomponents if we really want to boil it down even more. So that's the first question, is what specifically do you mean by that? And then the next question is, well, why aren't you there now? What's holding you back? And sometimes it's, like I said, and in that pyramid, there's a hierarchy, and the bottom of the pyramid is health. That is the foundation for all of that. And none of this stuff matters if you're not healthy. Right. And so if you're not healthy, you can't go to the gym and work out for the fitness person. Right. If you're injured, it's going to limit the menu significantly of what we even can do with you. And then for the athlete, no one ever scored a goal or a touchdown or hit a home run from the training room. Like, we need to be healthy. Your best ability is availability. And so that's the first thing, is whatever we do from a health perspective. Now, can we prevent injuries? We can mitigate them. We can reduce the risk, but I can't prevent, a fat guy from rolling into your ankle in a football field. I can't prevent, a collision in the outfield in a baseball game. Those are things that just are kind of the nature of the sport. But we can at least minimize and avoid a good chunk of those with good, solid training.
So on that note, I love that you made that point. On that note, how much has that changed in your career personally, that kind of priority of like, I don't want to harm you, I don't want to hurt you in the weight room, and I want to build you up so you can respond better when some of those other challenges happen. I think early in my career, I would have gone so far towards like, let's increase your performance at whatever cost, that we're not really mindful about injury prevention or mitigation, like you said.
That's always been kind of high on the list, and it kind of fell into it. And I've had the good graces of one is early on, because I knew a little bit more than any other trainers in the big box gym. Anytime you walked in the door, if you had any level of concerns, knee, hip, shoulder, low back, whatever it was, every other trainer got scared to death and said, "Oh, you better go see Eric." Right. And a lot of times I got put in positions I was way out of my league for, but those are situations that, look, they said you're the best option. So that forced me to go and learn a whole bunch more. I had a situation where one of my early clients was a guy, Bob, who was in a wheelchair. And they gave him to me in his first session, and it took me and his wife almost the entire session just to get him on a hammer strength chest press machine. And I picked that one just because it would seem the easiest transfer, and it had a seatbelt on it. Like, I don't want to drop this guy. And when he went to press the weight, he was wiggling all over the place. I'm like, holy crap, I am way out of my league. So I was point blank. I said, he's such a cool, awesome spirit. It was a guy who was riding his motorcycle, got in an accident, and got in a pretty bad accident, but the accident itself didn't get him. It was a bacteria that got into his spine in the hospital and shut him down from the waist down. And he was in a wheelchair. And at the end of the first session, I'm like, Bob, I'm going to be honest. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not the guy for you. And he looked at me point blank and said, look, insurance isn't paying for my physical therapy anymore. They cut me off. It's either you or I sit home and rot. So you're the best option I got. And so that kind of, was a blessing to say, look, you better start learning some stuff. And that's where I started learning about developmental movement. I started learning about things like, what can I do to start helping this guy learn how to move? And so that was an incredibly powerful experience, right? To kind of to force you to learn and get outside of your comfort zone of just doing sets and reps. And I'm going to do chest and tries and back and bis. Then, I also saw situations where not only was I getting those clients, but as I started to grow and expand and get out of the box gym and get a little bit of reputation, I saw I was getting clients from other trainers who were hurting their clients, right? Literally, there's a relatively well-known strength guy who's near me, and I would get a couple clients, a month that would just get jacked up by this guy. Right. They got super strong, but they get jacked up by him. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the gym where people get hurt at. And so that really looked at what are the filters and systems I can use to make sure that I'm not screwing you up. And so, we talk about injury prevention, is that a lot of what we look for, like even with the FMS, it'd say, it doesn't predict injury and it doesn't prevent injury. There's correlations with people who move poorly and higher injury rates. Yes. But what it does in terms of preventing injury, it prevents me from hurting you, right? Like I like the old expression of, you can walk out tomorrow and get hit by a bus, right? But I'm not going to be the guy who pushes you in front of it.
That's right.
And that's basically the thing, is that we're inflicting damage as trainers and coaches a lot of times that we don't even realize. And so if we could be much more aware of that, to say, what is safe to do with this individual? What's ideal to do with this individual? I can eliminate me being the problem in this equation.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the most common mistakes you see, either with somebody who's doing their own training program, they're not working with a professional, but they're, trying to get to their goals, or maybe the fitness professional who is less experienced? What are some of the major mistakes you see with them?
So there's kind of two ends of the continuum in our profession, right? There's the go hard or go home population that just shut up and train, lift heavy, all, balls to the wall, loud AC/DC, no matter what, come rain or shine. Everybody thinks they're working with David Goggins and Jocko Willink, and it's just not the reality, right? You're working with an accountant who works 12 hours a day in front of a laptop, right? And he hasn't exercised in 20 years. You can't take those principles and mindset to that individual. Then on the flip side, you have what I see a lot, especially in teaching something like FMS. We get I call them the corrective exercise geeks, where it's just like, I want to try to fix every little thing I find. Then I got a goniometer in my, pocket protector. And it's like, I would just want to find a way to justify myself as a corrective exercise specialist. But the whole purpose of a screen is not just to find out what you may have wrong, but it's to find out what you have right. And what happens if I do a movement screen on you and you're good? Like everything's passing. Well, if I'm the corrective exercise guru, I'm out of a job, right? So I have nothing to fix, or I'm going to use my confirmation bias to find something to fix that may not really need to be fixed. So that's kind of the two wild ends of the continuum of don't be one of those two. You need to know when you need to push the pedal down. You need to know when you need to pump the brakes. And that even goes from from the actual programming standpoint to even the psychological aspects of how do you address your clients. Brett Bartholomew in his book, Conscious Coaching, does an awesome job of kind of looking at, there's different types of clients who walk in your door. There's the ones that need more of a back rub and a pat on the back, and the other ones need a kick in the ass. And how do you know between the two? If you're just going to be the hard-nosed, sleeveless, with a dip in your mouth and spitting in a Gatorade bottle type of guy, well, then you're gonna tune out a whole lot of people. But if you're also the nothing but khakis and a polo shirt and everything is done with rubber bands and foam rollers, you're also not going to get a certain amount of the population. That there needs to be somewhere in between where you can be this chameleon in the course of a day. Because the reality is, at least in the fitness industry, most people think they're going to go out and they're going to do this one certain population, and you just don't. You got to pay your bills. And so unless you're the strength coach of, Ohio State or Alabama football, you're going to work with a very dynamic population. And even in those populations, even if you are one of those, understand that within the 90 or 100 players that you're working with, there's huge changes in dynamics within that population, even though there's less of a variability, right? Because they're all doing the same thing. They're all following the same schedule. They're all there for the same purpose. But even within that, you have kids who are coming from farmland, Iowa, to the Everglades, to the Bronx. And how do I coach them all differently? They're all coming from different backgrounds. They all have a different medical history, training history, injury history. And so learning how to be adaptive as a coach or a trainer is maybe one of your biggest assets.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you think about all those situations, and you think about, kicking the kid in the ass versus putting your arm around him. That can change for the same person in the week. That could be completely different in spring camp than, 2 days before a game. You have to be able to adapt to that. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I was going to ask you specifically also about functional training. We're talking a lot here about highly specific exercises to do for people. There's this term in fitness, functional training, where, if you have certain movements that you're doing on the field, on the pitch, on the court, you can do those same looking movements in the gym and accomplish the same thing. How do you think about functional training?
Okay, if that's your definition, then I think it's nonsense.
Perfect.
If your definition is I'm going to take what I see in an activity and I'm going to then replicate that in the gym, just and attach a kettlebell or rubber band or dumbbell, then you're not getting it, right? That's one of those terms: functional training, core training, all these things that have really been bastardized and taken in the wrong direction. You have a certain function that you're looking to do. For some people, that function is just kind of going about their day. They get up, they go to work, they sit in the desk, and then they come home and they do some chores around the house, and maybe they play an occasional game around the golf. And so that is their function they need to be prepared for, as opposed to, someone who's a professional soccer player. And so with that, we have to understand that anything we do that's going to help make that experience more vibrant and more robust is functional. And so you can make an argument that leg extensions on a machine could be functional if what they're lacking is that strength in that tissue, right? Functional doesn't mean I buy everything out of the Perform Better catalog and I'm balancing on one leg on a Bosu while I'm spinning a medicine ball on the other foot, while I'm swinging a kettlebell and, swinging a body blade in the other hand. That's circus acts, right? And that's what people took functional training and ran with it in the wrong direction and didn't understand the concepts of that. And so functional to me is whatever is going to improve your life experience and the demands of what your environment is going to put onto you. And so not understanding what makes those elements happen and what's behind those elements makes people go out and buy a bunch of contraptions for balance when they don't understand, okay, well, what goes into that balance? And there's a lot of factors to that other than just, I'm going to balance on a Bosu ball.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the way I trained for years and years and years. If you played basketball, great. Like, we're going to have you on a box. You might jump onto the box or off the box. You're going to have a medicine ball that you're going to throw like a chest pass because that looks like basketball. And it was really coming across the work of Dr. Doug McGuff and Body by Science that just kind of said, like, look, none of those things are in the same context. It might look like basketball, but it's not basketball. Basketball is basketball. It's played on a court that's this size. And it's 5-on-5 or 3-on-3 if you play that way. And it's like, you have to play your sport, your skill in the context that it's played, and you can't necessarily replicate that in the gym by doing things that kind of sort of look like it that aren't the same thing.
Well, there's two big mistakes there. One is we're very biased towards pointing at parts and muscles, right? And we how many times have someone does an exercise and they say, well, what does this work? What does this work? Because we've been trained in that body building mentality of you do this exercise for this part. And that's how we have back and biceps and chest and tris and those types of things, which is great if you are a bodybuilder, but for the gross majority of the population, that's not going to have the same carryover. So if we look at, like, I work with a lot of baseball players, and obviously shoulders are important for baseball players. So they'll see this yoga pose that, hey, this is great for working your shoulders. I feel my shoulders burning in this pose. This must be great for baseball because baseball needs shoulders. And you're trying to connect dots that you're skipping a lot of parts in. You have to understand that, yes, shoulders are important. Yes, and that may have some value at some part of the program, but understand that there's a speed and velocity that goes into what that shoulder has to experience. That's dynamic. That's happening in milliseconds. That you need to appreciate acceleration, deceleration, amortization, all those things that are going into that are very different than just holding a static pose. Yes, working same parts, but in a very different manner. And so if we don't appreciate all those dynamics and we just think of parts, that what's an exercise that works this part, that also is a part that I work in this sport, then you're going to really miss it. The second thing is not doing a kind of an audit of the activity that you're looking to do, right? And in terms of the dynamics of it. So like you talk about basketball, and everybody immediately, like you said, with basketball, we're going to do everything jumping. We're going to jump, because we want to improve our vertical. Now, if you watch a basketball game and how much time is spent going vertically versus how much time is spent going horizontally, you spend way more time going up and down the court than you do going up and down. And if you're, now the game is much more of a perimeter game. If you're an outside shooter, watch if you do an evaluation of Steph Curry over the course of a game, and you had to do a ratio of how much time he spends going vertical versus how much time he's going horizontal. It's significantly more horizontal. So with that, you want to develop more of that, because that's going to be the thing that moves the needle in his game, beating people down the court, getting to the ball, being able to adjust and change directions and be elusive and deceptive. That's going to change. That's what makes him special, not because he has the greatest vertical jump on the team. And then not to mention how much is actually getting covered within the dynamics of his practice, that he's jumping all day in practice. Do I need to add that additional element of vertical force? So that's where, unless you take a step back and do this kind of systematic audit of the demands in the environment that you're trying to prepare for, you're just kind of trying to do this for that. You're doing this exercise will create this thing, where it doesn't necessarily work that way. You can do some exercise will have carryover to a lot of things. A kettlebell swing will have carryover to a lot of things, other than, what you think it's going to do.
Yeah, that's very well explained also. If we go back to the pyramid that we're talking about and go back to the bottom and we're talking about health, what other surprising things do your athletes learn that they need to take care of to maintain their health?
So the layers are this. There's health. Then on top of that is movement. Everything we do is just movement. And it comes from a subset of basically, depending on how you look at it, 7 or 8 primary patterns that everything's derivative of. And then on top of that is performance. And there's all the sexy elements that are within that, the speed, the strength, the power, the agility, those things. Then on top of that is your recovery, which is sleep, nutrition, those sorts of things. And then on top of that is the mental aspects of it, your coachability, your grit, those things. And then on the top of the pyramid is actually your skill. That is, your ability to express all those elements in your sport, right? Or whatever your skill is that you're training for. Now, one of the things that is one of the first things that I teach, and it shows up, and I think 5 of the layers, just for different reasons, is breathing. Okay. And the way that I explain it to my clients and athletes is that you can go for weeks without food. You can go for days without water. You can only go a couple minutes at best without air. It's the most important thing we do. It's how we tell if you're alive or dead. And so breathing is extremely important. It ties in the foundation of health, right? You can have, and breathing is incredibly important. In how it impacts your health in so many ways. Are you a nasal breather? Are you a mouth breather? Your oxygen consumption is what essentially mobilizes energy in your body. And so that it shows up in health. Then it shows up in movement, and it freaks people out when we go to a course. And all I have them do is have them do 20 deep breaths in certain postures, and they go back and they now change their hip mobility. Like their leg raise gets better. Their toe touch changes, and they're freaked out by that just by doing some breathing. Then it shows up in performance. In your performance, I can change your force output by teaching you how to amplify and utilize your breathing as a stabilization mechanism, right? Breathing will then show up again in recovery, right? It'll show up in terms of, I tell all my high school football coaches that I work with that we know how well conditioned you are in your timeouts in the fourth quarter. When the team comes over and they all have their mouthpieces in, we're golden, right? If they come over and they're breathing through their mouth, we're toast. We need to work on this, right? And so we do specific drills to work on nasal breathing and work on breathing recovery and how to reset and lower your heart rate through breathing techniques. And then it shows up again in recovery, right? And so, it shows up again in your mental state. You can change and shift from a more sympathetic fight or flight type of state to a more rest and recover parasympathetic state by just 5 or 6 deep breaths. And then you can even have it show up again in your skill. So it shows up in all of these layers where breathing is probably the most foundational thing. And it's probably the thing that I really missed early on. And now it finds its way into every single session, workout, teaching that I do, because it's so incredibly impactful.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. We've been fortunate enough to host James Nestor on our show, Patrick McEwen on our show, both best-selling authors who really focus on the breathing, and the implications of proper breathing are just astronomical, even in your jaw and in your teeth. I mean, I've corrected, for the most part, an overbite by mouth taping at night, and my jaw is actually literally coming forward. I can feel my airways a lot more clear. And so I'm curious, all of these different things that you're suggesting, breath work kind of runs through all of them, which is great. And they're all running through in very specific ways. I'm wondering if you have some of your favorite techniques. We don't have to go over all of them, but some as an example. We kind of touched over some, but maybe we can go a little deeper on some of your favorite ones and what specifically you do as far as drills to help with people breathing.
Absolutely. So in our course, we actually have a thing that I created called the Wheel of Breathing. Right. And there's like all these different types of breathing. So the first is kind of just a reset and recover, what some people call like a diaphragmatic or belly breathing, where we're going to focus on breathing in through the nose. And then we want to either have a pause or we want to at least exaggerate the exhale, because inhalation is coupled with excitation. Exhalation is with relaxation. So if you're to do the basic, the Navy SEALs made popular box breathing of breathing in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 8, right? And just doing that, and that's going to help reset things. It'll lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, all those things. And those are key if I need to kind of down-regulate. I'll have people do it right before they go to bed. They'll say that they'll have more restful sleep. I'll have people, if let's say you're coming in for a workout and you just had a super stressful day and I need to refocus, we'll do that. We'll have you do it in a sport specific situation. If I work with baseball players, and if you're in a pressure situation and you can reset between each pitch and just do that breathing to kind of reset and get you in more of that flow type state. So that's first. And it's also the optimal environment for learning. So if you're trying to learn new skills, especially when we talk about corrective exercise or learning how to learn new movements, that's the state we want to be in, right? So as soon as you stop breathing, you stop learning. So that's one of the keys there as a foundation, is that type of more of a deep, concentrated breathing where we're focusing on the exhale. Now, as we start to shift into more performance, then when you take a breath of air in, I usually use a balloon as an example. If you took a breath of air in, your lungs now will almost double in size. And to make room for that, it pushes down on your viscera, your guts. And so if you now seal the opening at the top, right, and do call a Valsalva maneuver, you kind of seal off the roof and you don't let the air out, you've now created a pressure chamber within your torso. That pressure creates a hydraulic lift mechanism, which is almost like an internal weight belt. That pressurization helps you as a platform to produce force of. So if I was going to go do a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift, before I go into the squat, I'm going to take a deep breath in, hold the breath, and then brace. Now, some power lifters even get the breath in and then take a second breath to get even more in. That pressurization, I'm going to hold that pressure and hold your breath on the way down. Once you get to the bottom, hiss the air out, because we don't want to let it all go. Imagine if you let go of the end of a balloon, it just kind of gets floppy. So you want to hiss it to keep that pressure in there, but let the air out as you get through your sticking points and then you're coming back up on your lift. Now, go a little bit more into power, the difference between strength and power is there's a time element. It has to happen now. So your breath should match the speed of your rep. So if I'm going to throw a medicine ball, or I'm going to swing an implement, I want to spit the air out really fast. So Olympic lifting, those type of things, I'm going to get the air in and then get the air out really fast. You listen to a martial artist or a boxer, or even why, you hear that, or that, or they're using that pressurization. If you put your fingertips right on your ab muscles, as you do that, you'll feel them tighten. They create a bracing right there. That's a high threshold bracing. And so that's, why we grunt when we pick up a couch. That's why you hear tennis players grunt when they hit a ball, to create that. It's a natural reflexive mechanism to create pressure. Now let's look at another side of performance where we look at more endurance type work. And that's where we want to have more rhythmic breathing to kind of keep you steady. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of teach it to set a rhythm, whether it's your strokes in the pool's a little bit different with swimming, but you can do it with your cadence on your bike, or the easiest things to learn your cadence in your running, where we're going to inhale for 2 and exhale for 3 is the easiest one to learn. So if you're running, if you inhale 2 strides, inhale 1, 2, exhale for 3, and that helps set a natural rhythm. And so especially when you get into races, and there's a bunch of people around you, can really easily go into panic mode and start to change your breathing and start to do that stuff. And this kind of helps set you in a steady way and kind of set cadence to your breathing. So that's kind of a more rhythmic type breathing. The last one is there's actually time. Well, there's not the last one. There's another one where, you talked about Patrick McKeon talks about the impact of breath holding. And Erwan LaCour does some stuff with breath holding as well. Wim Hof does some stuff with breath holding as well. The impact of being able to build up CO2 tolerance to be able to hold your breath is another impactful thing that you could do in a number of different ways. You can even do it while you're training. I have a workout that I'll do on the bike where I hold my breath after an exhale for every minute on the minute. And I'll hold the breath for 8 to 10 seconds. And then what I find is it really helps with cardiovascular fitness. And there's also a way you can use a timed breath hold or a timed exhale for a gauge of readiness. And I do that as part of a daily readiness screen. And I know Andy Galpin uses a timed exhale. There's also Patrick McKeon uses his BOLT score, or FMS. We have the FRC, which is more or less the same thing. It's just a timed breath hold after an exhale, and certain markers you want to hit for that to kind of tell you, if you're healthy or not, as well as if you're improving. And then last but not least, you have the other end of the spectrum. We talked about calming yourself down. Well, there's times you may want to hype yourself up, right? If you are going for that max lift, and then you just reverse the breathing, right? Well, if I were exaggerating the exhale, if I wanted to calm down, I exaggerate the inhale if I wanted to kind of wake myself up. And that's essentially what Tumo breathing, which Wim Hof then took and repackaged and made his breathing, which is an exaggerated inhale, where it's you just let the air fall out. So you take all the air in the world you can in, and you do that for a round, he does it in rounds of 20 to 30 breaths followed by a breath hold for 2 to 3, rounds or more. And so that you will find, doing first thing in the morning, that's, could be your morning kind of coffee right there. And so that can kind of it's a sympathetic stress, just like exercise is. That's a positive. It's a hormetic stress that actually is helpful. And so that's like all the different aspects of breathing in different ways for different strategies. Now, you pick the wrong one for the wrong time. Like, again, being someone who's at baseball, if I'm at a game tonight for baseball, and one of the parents yells to their son on the mound, "Breathe, Johnny, breathe," and they go, that's the worst thing they could do, right? They're going to totally screw it up, right? And so learning, just like any other training dynamic, breathing is an incredibly powerful toolbox, but has to use in the right place, at the right time, the right way.
That's right. Yeah, that was such a great explanation. I love how you talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And I wonder if this is one thing we maybe goofed up really early with HRV training, is we always wanted to lean people towards the more parasympathetic state. And it's almost like the sympathetic state got this bad rap of being like overstressed all the time. And it's like, no, you need those two things in balance. You don't want to be too far one or the other. You need them at the right times, and understanding what tools you need to increase which one at the right time is what's most important.
I've gotten deep into Joel Jamieson's work and using the Morpheus strap, and had some of my clients use them, and they whether it's that or a whoop strap or an aura band, and they don't understand that if they have a low day, that sometimes that's actually a good thing, right? That if you're always at 85%, means you're never stressing yourself enough that you're ever going to change. And so if there needs to be that's the whole way exercise works, is the most fundamental thing of exercise science, is you challenge yourself and your body goes, holy crap, I don't know what you just did, but if you're going to keep doing that, I have to get better. And so that intermittent challenge, I just heard a great interview with Dr. Rhonda Patrick with Andrew Huberman, and talking about intermittent challenge and the positive effects that has on our physiology. And that intermittent challenge could be exercise, is one of the most powerful ones. But also intermittent challenge from heat, from cold, from even possibly periods of fasting. That all that does is make our body more robust and resilient to respond to those stressors. And so if you don't ever have those stress, if you live your life, with shoes on and 72 degrees and sitting on your couch, you're getting weaker and weaker by the moment.
100%. Yeah, you're not creating any kind of resilience. And then when a challenge comes along, you're not going to have that resilient strength to help you out. It is the temperature and the light exposure and all those different things, exposing yourself to challenging workouts over time. Having your HRV go down in a training block is not necessarily a bad thing. But again, understanding those numbers and responding to them appropriately and creating the workouts around them and the training program around them is what's so critical. I do want to mention, you've already mentioned a few tools. There's such a cool balance between the science of coaching and the art of coaching. And you really need both, in my opinion, to be a great coach. What are some of the more, science-based tools that you place a lot of value in, and maybe some that you really don't value as much that people get a little too overexcited about?
So if we look now, what's trending is we do have a lot of wearables, right? All those things that I just mentioned, and taking those in context is important. Like, my clients will joke if they have a low recovery score on one of those things, they'll say, I don't know why I'm even here. I don't know why I even got out of bed today. Right. And that's just one variable of many. So if I look and do my personal readiness screen that I created, is I'm going to look at movement, just your fundamental gross movement patterns. Can you touch your toes? Can you extend back? Can you rotate right to left? Can you squat? Can you reach behind you? Those kind of things. And I'm looking at that not so much as a intake movement screen as I am as a variable from the norm. To say, if you normally can touch your toes and today you can't, that's a red flag, right? Then we also, on top of that, look at breath hold time. We look at balance and like a lower body motor control screen, or like a forward reach. I also look at grip strength is incredibly impactful. And then just a self score of how do you feel today? And all those things are tripwires. They're all things that are just going to catch to make sure I don't miss anything, and to make sure that I don't go full steam ahead with a program that you're not ready for on the safety side. And so what happens is, let's say, I do your breath hold time every time you come in, and normally it's, you're sitting somewhere in the low 20s, 21, 22, 23, and all of a sudden today it's 14. Casey, what's up? That's a little low. Did you sleep all right? Yeah, how's your food? Oh, no, I had a lousy night's sleep. I've been really stressed out with work. And okay, well, you didn't come in offering that information. I needed this tripwire to catch you. And now that I know that, guess what? Today was supposed to be a higher volume, or today was supposed to be a more intense day. I might need to dial that back a little bit, because you're not going to be able to handle it. But on the flip side, let's say today you hit 30, you hit 35. Today is the day to put the pedal down. And so to know when you have those green, yellow, and red lights going off, having multiple things is probably one of the abilities that kind of help you really dial in your programming. But if you just take one thing as your Bible, you're gonna end up, there's a lot of days my aura ring says, don't do anything today. Like, but I've had great days, right? It's just more of an awareness piece. So as far as, things like that, I think have value in the right context. Where I think people, miss out is, again, just looking at things in terms of exercises and parts and trying to replicate that. But whether it's just I want to follow somebody's workout for this upper body workout. Well, upper body for what? Right? I can do 3 different upper body workouts with 3 totally different effects, and understand the exercise doesn't really necessarily create the effect. If I do a set of squats for 1, a set of squats for 5, set of squats for 10 or 20 or 100, all those things are squats, and they're going to have 4 or 5 very different effects, right? Based on whether one's going to build strength, one's going to build more hypertrophy, one's going to build more muscular endurance. So I really have to look a little bit deeper with that. And then the other big part about grabbing workouts is that we don't take it in context of ourselves. And so I don't know if we talked about this last time. We talked about The Rock last time.
We mentioned it, but it's always great to hear it again.
Okay. So I'll get people that come into me and they'll say, "Oh, I saw this workout The Rock did. Can we do it?" I'll say, "Okay, do you have a financial planner? Do you have an accountant?" And they'll say, "Yeah, why?" And I'll say, "Here's what I want you to do is go to them, call them up today and say, 'Can we follow The Rock's financial plan?'" And they'll be like, "No, Rock's worth like $1 billion. He's in every movie ever made in the last 10 years. And I'm like, "Exactly. So you don't have his assets." Well, guess what? Physically, you don't either. The Rock was a Division I athlete who played at Miami University in its prime, right? He is a freak. And so you have just as much right doing his workout as you do following his financial plan. So you need to have it in context of who you are, right? David Goggins and Jocko Willink are incredibly inspirational individuals. I've read their books. I think they're awesome, but you can't take somebody off the couch and do their workouts. They're built different. I've had a chance to teach on 2 Navy SEAL bases. Those are special people. And to think, "Oh, I'm going to do that," at very best, you're just going to, obliterate yourself and ruin the rest of your week. And at worst, there was a tragic story, because I work with high school athletes. There was a tragic story of a high school football player who died because the coach wanted to do Navy SEAL training. And they were carrying a log, like the equivalent of a telephone pole, with a bunch of players over their head. And the kid dropped it on his head and died. Now, like, what makes you think that a 14-year-old wet noodle who's never stepped foot in a weight room can replicate the training of some of the most elite special forces soldiers in the world? Like, that's a huge disconnect. That's the biggest mistake, is you're disconnected from reality of what you're actually capable of. The art of this is working right at the edge of your ability, where you're 2 things. You're challenged, so it's enough that'll change you, but you're also successful, where you're not broken from it. And that's the art of it, is where do I find that? How do I get that dialed in just right, where I can push you as hard as possible without going overboard?
Yeah. Yeah, I used that exact example today with a first meeting with a new client. They have never worked out in their life, in their 30s, and we use that exact example that I've stolen from you recently in crushing your content over the last few days. Is we need to challenge you, but you shouldn't feel like you can't get out of bed tomorrow. I want you to also feel success. I want you to feel like you accomplished something, and we can ride that line, and create a program around that that's not only successful and gets her to her goals, but is also engaging and fun, and keeps her interested in the program. I think that is one of so many other elements, and we've covered so many of them in this discussion today. I think is like a main point. If you're going to coach somebody, you have to keep all of these in the back of your mind and program accordingly. And there's a lot of variables there, but again, to your point, I think that's where the art of coaching really shines through.
And it's very difficult too, sometimes, when you have different dynamics and completely different backgrounds between the client and the trainer. And Matt Barrick, who's a friend, and he was a head of training at Equinox. I'm sorry. And so Matt's a brilliant guy, and he would talk about one of the challenges when you train his trainers is the dynamics of when you're a 24-year-old trainer to appreciate what a 58-year-old is looking for. And as 24 years old, if I bashed myself and just went balls to the wall and I couldn't walk up the stairs the next day, is a badge of honor. 58-year-old could give a shit less about that, and actually wants nothing to do with that, because they can't say, hey, I can't, go upstairs to a meeting, or I can't go play with my kids or play around to golf now because of a workout. That's defeats the whole purpose. I work out so I can do those things. And I don't want to work out. And that makes me not be able to do those things. So the context of the demographical differences between the client and trainer is also incredibly important. That what's important to you at 24, I can tell you, is definitely not important to you at 55.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where that young trainer would really be benefited to ask questions and then shut the hell up and just listen. And I see so little of that in the industry. And I wish more people would understand that and learn that we're trying to push our programs and our wants and our goals onto other people, rather than taking the time to really understand somebody, do what you do, put them through a proper assessment, assess them daily with some simple things that they can do, and create workout programs for the client, not for the trainer, but for the client.
Yeah, I think one of the most empowering things, being the old man now in the business, is I really don't care what you do, right? If you come in for me for a program, I have no vested interest. Like, there's no World Exercise Committee that gives me a commission if I give you, kettlebell swings versus push-ups, right? I really don't care. Like, I know lots and lots. I know hundreds of exercises. I know dozens and dozens of different ways to program those same exercises, and how I program it really doesn't matter to me at the end of the day. Like, and so how do I know what to give to you? Well, you write your program. And so when I put someone through an assessment on day one, I said, what you just did was write your program for me. I had no idea what to do with you when you walked in the door, but now you wrote your program for me. You really move poorly. So guess what? You're getting a lot of movement work in there. You need to change your body composition. So guess what? You're getting part of that as part of your program. Your performance is through the roof. I don't need to work a whole lot on your performance. My job's to maintain it and maybe we'll boost it a little bit. That's not your weakest link. So you write your program for me. But at the end of the day, I don't care what's on your sheet. Right. I've been doing this too long and too many sessions that I really don't care what I put in your program. I have no vested interest in saying, oh, I really hope this person needs mobility work. I really like mobility work.
Yeah, I love that. That makes you such a great coach. And this has been such an amazing and fun conversation. I always learn something when I get to talk with you. Eric Degatti, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Easiest way that I created specifically for situations like this is go to my website, which is my name, Eric Degatti, EricDagati.com. And on the front page, you'll see that some of the stuff I'm up to. I got some cool stuff cooking now with just actually launch my own app that I use for clients. So it allows me to work with clients in a little bit more robust way when they can't get to me. Have the program that we've been working on with myself and Mike Perry on program design, as well as some other projects. But on that page, there's also something called Ask Eric. If you have a question and say, well, what about, you're talking about breathing. How should I breathe if I'm doing this? Or you're talking about, certain different modalities. How do I find out more about this? I put it in there, it goes right into my email, and I'll get back to you and hopefully steer you in the right direction.
So cool. I love that you offer that. It's cool to be able to learn from you in platforms like this and this podcast. And I know you're starting a podcast too, so we're really looking forward to that. But also just to be able to ask you random questions. I think it's so cool that you put yourself out there to be able to do that. So it's such an awesome conversation. Thank you so very much for all of your work, for your career, for not skipping any steps, and for teaching us about the art of coaching. We really appreciate you and all your work. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show today.
Awesome. This is just as fun, if not more than the first time, Mike. Now I almost want to do it again.
You are invited anytime. Good luck with the security around your house and the bushes. I think now it's just going to get even worse.
I look forward to it. I'm looking forward to just flying past the Kardashians and my followers.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. And it's only a matter of time before I'm on the cover of People. And
that's right.
And really just kind of put a nice cherry on top.
That's right. Well, I do think the fame and fortune might go to your head a little bit more than we thought initially, but that's okay. Looking forward to that. Eric, thank you again so very much for everything that you do, and thank you for appearing on our show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, brother. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. Thank you again so very much for continuing to listen to and support Boundless Body Radio. This little passion project that we started almost 2 years ago just continues to steadily grow. We are reaching more people than ever, and we keep receiving so many inspirational and amazing messages from you. We see it in all the reviews that we get, and we really appreciate that. So thank you so very much for that. We love understanding which guests you really connect with and which content you really appreciate the most. We wanted to take a second also to give a huge shout out to our amazing guests. We love the people that we've been able to host and all their amazing content in these awesome conversations. And we have to say, in the pipeline, we already have lots of great episodes that will be coming to you soon, and lots of great guests. Some will be new to the show, and others will be familiar to you if you have been listening to our show for a while. So look forward to that. On our website, which is myboundlessbody.com, we are still running a lot of the same offers that we have been running for the last few months. These offers are complimentary, and we've really had a great time connecting with people all over the world who are taking advantage of these. So if you go to our website, which again is myboundlessbody.com, on the main page, you will find a button that says Book Now. You can book either a functional movement screen, which is a movement screening tool used to evaluate movement patterns, to optimize mobility, fitness, and injury prevention. We do that virtually through Zoom with a bit of creativity. You can book that session, which takes about 30 minutes and is complimentary. You can also see another booking for a 30-minute consultation with us, where we can really chat about anything that you like. We can talk about fitness or nutrition or help you come up with a plan for you to be able to reach your goals. As always, it really helps us grow if you leave us a rating and review. So please be sure to go to Apple, leave us a 5-star rating and review. And thank you, as always, for listening to Boundless Body Radio.